Welcome into Mississippi State Live here on the Voice of College Football. Andrew Miller here on a Monday evening, a few minutes late. I know I tend to do that, especially on the Monday show. I always feel like I have a lot of notes to get together that I failed to do ahead of time. But we're not too late. It's 6:10. But yeah, happy to be here. We got a lot of stuff to talk about tonight. There's been a lot of positive news for Mississippi State athletics over the past few days. And yeah, definitely want to dive into all of that. We got baseball to talk about, certainly. We have the NFL draft to recap, and I'm trying to check something real quick, so forgive me for that. Portal additions, both for football and for men's basketball, for that matter. Even football at this point, we're still getting additions late here. I apologize. I'm trying to find somebody because I wanted to shout somebody out real quick and make sure that I've got the right stuff. Sorry. I know this is great podcasting here early. You'll have to forgive me. That won't work. Shoot. Okay, never mind. I'm sorry about that. But, yeah, man, I'm scrambled here early. My apologies. I was trying to pull something up. I forgot to pull it up before I started the stream because I wanted to shout somebody out because I had a comment just telling me hey, how much they appreciate my stuff. And it was like, oh, I didn't respond until 5 days later. I apologize for that. If I respond late to comments, I forget to come on here and check. I greatly appreciate those of you who do leave comments on the post and want to be a part of the conversation. Whether it's asking questions, just giving your own commentary, or in this case, love the support. Thank you so much. I wanted to shout you out on here. I forgot to pull it up. But yeah, I'm bad about not reading the comments. So please forgive me on that. I'll try to be better, make sure I'm checking this a little bit more regularly so I can respond to you guys. Because, yeah, like we've had some fun stuff to put out over the past few days, and I love to hear that you guys are enjoying it all. So appreciate everybody who has been tuning in. And before we get into all the spiel stuff here, 3 minutes into the show, I did have a comment early from my guy, Jacob Wright. Can you give us your take on State 1878? I don't believe I've heard it yet. Thanks. I feel like we're finally on the forefront of something related. Yeah, so I think I did talk a little bit about State 1878, like the day it was announced or the day after. I had a stream on I think I was able to bring it up. I like it. I think it's a smart move. For me personally, some of the content that's going to come with State 1878 is not stuff that I necessarily am going to be deep on, and it's just me personally because I've never been one to care too much about the behind the scenes look at the program, just in terms of interviews with players and stuff like that. I love to know what's happening behind the scenes, but the way I kind of like to know I don't mean the dirt. I don't want to know a bunch of bad stuff, but I want to know I would love to know how's the operation work? And what is your process on this? What is your thought process going into this? What is the approach you're taking to doing those things? That's the behind the scenes level stuff that I like. So for me, it's not personally something that I'm going to get a ton into. But, and don't at all suggest you take this as me saying that, you shouldn't support it, because I think you absolutely should if it's something that interests you. I know there's a lot of fans that love that kind of stuff, and a lot of people that want to have that close access to the players. And especially in this era, look, where you're paying for a lot of these guys to come to your program, I think you deserve an opportunity to get to know them better if that's something that you want. I think we're in an era where it feels like players are less connected to their programs than ever before. And that's something I've heard consistently from a lot of people, is that they miss that in college football. It's like you get to know these guys being a part of the team over, 3, 4, 5 years, to where now when it's, a new face every single season at every spot, it becomes much more transactional. It's like, all right, it's just another guy here. And like I said, well, for me, it's not really something that I dive into deeply. I understand a lot of people miss that connection, and this gives you an opportunity for that. But to the comment Jacob made, from an NIL standpoint, being at the forefront of it, that's the biggest thing. Is it's another way to raise money for MSU athletics. And it's frankly, it's what what should be happening. It should be a way to put money into MSU athletics, and then you get this in return and get that access in return. And obviously, Robbie has been as tied in as anyone covering Mississippi State for years and years now doing the job. So having a guy there who can continue to give you that inside access and let you know. And from what I understand, there's always a level of skepticism. Anytime you have something connected to the university, it's like, all right, well, what, how much is going to be allowed to be said on a message board? And, is criticism going to be allowed? And from what I've seen, heard, because I do have, at least one friend who signed up for it, it functions like a normal board, honestly, which is refreshing. That's a positive to hear, because you don't want somebody, just because we're connected to the university, to just kind of, blow sunshine and rainbows if sunshine and rainbows is not what there is to talk about. And to be able to speak the truth, for fans to be able to put their opinions out there just like you could on any other board, I think is a big positive for it. But also being able to have that interaction with the team and get to know the program is a really cool thing. So obviously it's a way, if you want to know something happening with MSU athletics, you're going to know it before anybody else if you're a part of State 1878. And if you want to have that closer connection to the team, you're going to get that through State 1878, while knowing that the money you're putting into that is helping Mississippi State and college athletics. And do I still think it's ridiculous that we're putting it on the fan bases to be like, hey, if you guys want to win games, it's on you to put money into the program? Yeah, but that's kind of the reality of where we're at in college sports. Maybe that changes down the line, although I don't know if it ever will. I mean, it's not like boosters weren't a thing for a long time. If the bag man wasn't a thing for a long time. Having rich people who love your teams is always going to be a benefit. It always has been in college football and probably always will. It's just obviously the NIL era, it's sort of turned into this expectation of the average fan is having to put into the program. And a lot, I think up until these things like State 1878, it's been a lot of, well, you just, if you're going to be a good fan, you'll give to the collective and or give to the rev share or whatever. And you'll leave it at that. And that's how this program will be successful. And you got what do you get out of it? Well, you get out of it the chance that our program's going to win games. With something like State 1878, it's a situation of like, yeah, you're hoping that you're doing this because it's going to benefit the school, but you also get content out of it as a fan. So I definitely think, like I said, I'm not going to tell you personally that State 1878 is something that I'm, going to be fired up to do myself, just because, like I said, a lot of the content is just not stuff that I personally care a ton about. That sounds so negative. I'm not trying to make it sound that way. Like, it's me personally. Like, I don't necessarily care about chatting it up with one of the players. That's me. But I think for a lot of people, like, yeah, that's awesome that is an opportunity available while still functioning like a message board and having everything else. So it's a good move for State. I'm sure that I already know there's a lot of people who are in on it, and I think there's going to be more and more people who are in on it. And yeah, it's State at the forefront of something NIL related. I feel like I'm trying to like explain my personal, like, it's just not for me, while also I think it's a great thing for the school without sounding like I'm telling people not to do it. I think you should do it. If you're someone who is like, if that is the type of content that's going to interest you, I think absolutely you sign up for it and you go be a part of it. So it's great that State has created that avenue as an opportunity for people. And like Robbie and the guys over there, I think are going to put a lot of great stuff out, and it's going to be good for Mississippi State. So yeah, State 1878 is a good move. It's another positive way to help bring more money into the program. And for what it's worth, I do give to the Bulldog Initiative. I do want to make that clear. Like, I know the Bulldog Initiative is kind of it feels like that might be changing to where that's not going to be a thing much longer, which I say, like, I'm a broke person. It's not like I'm giving big money. Like, I don't want to sit here like saying like people should do this if I'm not giving any money back to MSU. No, I am contributing to their collective. But I think if whichever avenue fits best for you, if you're someone you've got the means to give anything, yeah, definitely want to make sure you want to give that. And 1878 is probably an avenue that a lot of people are going to be more interested in. So it's a cool move for Mississippi State. Appreciate everybody who's here and tuning in or catching us after the fact. If you could, please leave us a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already and have those notifications turned on so you do know when we do go live. And, of course, Tell all the Bulldog fans, friends, whoever you have in your life that loves MSU about what we're doing here. And you can tell them that you can check us out live Mondays at 6 p.m. Central Time, sometimes a little bit late, Thursdays at 7 p.m. Central Time as well. And you can obviously also catch the show wherever you get your podcast from after the fact if you're not able to be here for the YouTube show live. All right, 10 minutes in, and we just finished out the intro. But, hey, we had a great question from Jacob in the chat. If you got stuff you guys want answered, please leave it below. And if you want to go like Jacob came in early, 5:17, like right after I got the stream posted, and dropped a comment in there, and we'll hit that stuff right off the jump. Unless it's something that's going to go into like a topic we'll get into on the show. I'm perfectly happy to open up with questions early on to start a show before we get into whatever we're going to talk about. The big thing we are going to start off today with, though, is Bulldog baseball. They get the sweep at home against LSU, a thrilling series. Open up Friday night with a walk-off Kevin Maluski bomb in the 11th inning to get a 10-8 victory to open up the series. And that was a game that, as it happened, I put out that in and of itself, winning the game in that manner is huge, and felt like that is a huge momentum builder. And frankly, I think if they had lost that game, they lose the series, who knows? They might have gotten swept, especially because of the way the games played out the rest of the weekend. And not that we knew it at the time, but this was a series where Mississippi State just had to grind it out and find ways to win, and they did that. Obviously, you get the walk-off in extra innings on Friday. The incredible game on Saturday, you get the 9-8 victory. Jacob Parker playing the hero to tie the game with the grand slam. There was at the 6th inning that had happened, I believe it was. The 7th inning for Mississippi State. Yeah, down 7-2 going into the 7th inning. And obviously are able to LSU was completely rattled in that moment. You get the bases loaded with no outs, you walk home a run, and then Jacob Parker steps up and hits the biggest hit of his career, and what might be one of the if Jacob Parker is someone that State fans should be understandably very excited about for the rest of for the future, for sure. And he's going to have plenty of big hits for MSU. He's going to have plenty of monumental home runs. You feel confident about that and going to help State win a lot of ball games. There's a possibility he just hit the biggest hit of his college career, and nobody's going to complain because that's like what will be the biggest hit of his college career. I hope he has a more monumental one down the line, but if that's the biggest one, that's a pretty dang good one to have to help to tie the ball game there. And then obviously State was able to get a couple more runs there as LSU continued to implode there in the 8th inning to win the series. And then you go into Sunday, and look, getting the series win was ultimately going to be enough, right? And you felt like you would have some momentum off of that. But realistically, when we talk about State's chances for hosting and still fighting for a top 8 national seed, you needed, after getting swept at home twice, getting back-to-back sweeps was going to be a big deal, especially against a team in LSU that's just not very good. And you do that. And it's so funny, all 3 days you're down 3-0 after the top of the first and have to fight back. And obviously this is one you get down 8-5, but with the way the series had played out all weekend, it was no surprise State was able to fight back in this one as well and get the 13-8 victory, really to start to pour it on LSU. I was thinking of in the 6th inning with 4 runs there, and then obviously tack on a couple more each in the 7th and 8th to really pull away. Big weekend for State at the plate. Obviously, 9+ runs in every single game. And look, we talked about coming into this, LSU's pitching had been a weakness, obviously. That had been an issue for them all season. They were a team that liked to issue a lot of free bases, and that had cost them. Because if you look at the pure pitching numbers in terms of strikeouts, in terms of batting average allowed, you would look at that and not really think too much of it like, okay, well, they're not that terrible of a pitching staff, right? But when you give a bunch of free passes, it's going to come back to haunt you. We've seen it with Mississippi State, obviously, in the past where, if you're putting a bunch of guys on base, it doesn't matter if teams are only hitting, 250 against you. Well, 250 is a pretty bad batting average allowed, but it doesn't matter if you're getting a bunch of strikeouts and if your opponents are not necessarily batting at a high clip. When you put batters on base, the occasional single is going to bring in some runs. And that's what happened in this game. And when you look Friday night, LSU walked 8 batters and then walked 7 on Saturday, 7 on Sunday. So average between 7 and 8 walks on the weekend in every single game. It was a problem for for LSU all season, and State took advantage. And State did a great job of being patient at the plate. That was kind of the thing we said coming into this is, look, if you're Mississippi State, obviously the lineup had been going through a slump. You felt like you got a little bit of momentum against South Carolina, but you were very much home run dependent there for a few weeks. Be patient at the plate. Like, let them put you on base and then go from there. And State was able to take advantage. And obviously, look, LSU made plenty of mistakes as well. I guess State had more errors in the first game than they did, but 3 errors for LSU on Saturday, and then another 3 errors on Sunday. It just a very we talk about like walking 7+ batters in every single game, and then a couple games with 3 errors. LSU is just an undisciplined baseball team, and Mississippi State took advantage. But that again goes into State like at the plate was just a lot better in this game. Ace Reese with a huge weekend, home runs in every single game. I think he had a couple multi-hit games in there. Noah Sullivan had a big weekend. Blake Beavis gave you some big moments. Aiden Teal had at least 1 homer. I think he had multiple, right? Multiple home runs for Aiden Teal on the weekend. Garrick Fry's been playing good baseball for you for a while now. Even when State as a lineup as a whole was kind of slumping, he was performing well. You just got a lot more production. Obviously, we talked about Jacob Parker and what he was able to do, and it was a big weekend for him overall, stepping up in some big moments. Like, this was the first time in a long time we saw State's lineup be what we expected it to be this season. You had gone almost a month of struggling at the plate in a way that you just weren't expecting them to, and they stepped up and showed it in this game. In a series where it had to happen, right? Because the weird thing is that your starting pitching struggled so much. Valinkas, Duke Stone and Charlie Foster all delivered poor starts, which is weird. Like, I know Valinkas in recent weeks has not been as dominant, but it was still like 3 runs or fewer in each game. And this one, I know it was only 3 earned runs, but 7 runs total, go across the plate while he's up there. And then, again, Duke Stone was not his normal self. Charlie Foster, I guess you can't really say not normal self because he's been up and down all season, right? But he had been pitching well recently for MSU, and his last few starts had looked really promising. And all 3 of those guys just didn't have a good weekend. And if you would have said, that's a big problem if all of those guys struggle. And State found a way because, one, their lineup stepped up. Like, you were going to have to score, obviously. But the bullpen was really, really impressive. The fact that you were not able to get, a ton of innings out of these guys and you still performed at a high level, it speaks a ton to the bullpen. And the bullpen performed really well against South Carolina. I don't think they gave up a single run all weekend. It wasn't as dominant against LSU, but it was pretty dang good. Both Maddox Miller and Maddox Webb gave you good showings. Ben Davis was really good for you in this one and pitched well for you. Jack Gleason gave you some good innings. And then obviously the story is what Jack Bauer did on Saturday. 3 2/3 innings pitched, gave up 3 hits, 1 run on that solo shot there in the bottom of the 9th when you had a 2-run lead, which was testy, but hey, that's the only one. 8 strikeouts. I mean, utterly dominant. And that slider that's gone viral is just insane to watch. He has really come along now. And it feels like the last couple times we've gotten to see him, he has pitched really well for MSU. He had that good stretch back against Georgia. He looks like a guy that is a big-time impact player for State. And, when State was in the peak of their slump, I kind of talked about, it's a little bit concerning, this pitching staff that, at the time, the starting pitching thing, I'll admit I was a little off on to say, like, how have you not really found a true number 4 option, which in this case was number 3 with McPherson down. But the bigger thing was the bullpen, right? Like the bullpen had been struggling, and you hadn't really seen guys taking the strides you had wanted them to. You felt like at this point you should start having guys emerge and trusting that it was like, okay, yeah, it's a lot of inexperience in the bullpen, a lot of talent. But as the season goes along, that group needs to be getting better, and it feels like it really hasn't happened. It's happening. In the last 2 weeks, you've seen it. State's bullpen has performed really, really well. Now, poor competition, yes. South Carolina's not a good team, and LSU at this point is just terrible. There's get past it, it's LSU. Get past preseason number 2, reigning national champs, whatever. LSU sucks. Like they're not a good team. But it's still much, much better than what it had been earlier in the year. And when you look at that, we kind of talked about as the year went along, if there was a thing State was going to – the big thing State was going to need, if you wanted to talk about hitting your stride at the right time, was that bullpen. Because you knew – you've got the starting pitching that's good enough. You've got a lineup that at its best is as good as any in the country. Can they get a few guys in the bullpen to emerge where you can trust going into every single matchup? Like, hey, we don't need our starter to go 7+ innings of no runs allowed in order for us to be able to win this thing. We have the arms and the pin to be able to get it done. And that's exactly what they've shown. Is the bullpen is now stepping up to give you that right at the time that the lineup is now getting back into form. Once you add Ryan McPherson back, and I know Oak has talked about, he's starting to, get back into the groove of it, hasn't given a timetable, but you feel like within a couple weeks you might get to see him again. Not that you would expect to see him long. I think your best case scenario for Ryan McPherson realistically is that you hit regional play and he's full go. That you spend these final 3 weeks of regular season and then the SEC tournament is sort of, I don't think he's going to pitch this weekend at Texas, but between Auburn, Texas A&M, and then the SEC tournament, you're ramping him back up. If he's back, maybe he's not back until, but you've got a month here basically to finally fully get him right. And then your hope is that you step into regional play and he's full go. And is back to what he was doing early in the year. And if you get that, you get McPherson back to where he was, plus Malenkas, plus Duke Stone, plus Charlie Foster at this point. It's been up and down, but he has shown you enough that you can, a lot of these series, you might need a 4th starter to step in, right? You can feel okay putting him out there that you're going to have a chance. The lineup looks like it's getting back to where it needs to be. Now you had a bullpen that has gotten better and better over these last few weeks. Now you're talking about looking like a team that can compete in the way we talked about the team preseason. Now, you do have to put it within the context of you've played 2 bad teams. South Carolina and LSU are not good ball clubs. And if you want to be a pessimist, you would come out of the LSU series saying, LSU is a defeated team. And at home, yeah, you got the wins, but you had to grind it out. You had to make these significant comebacks late in the game, all 3 games in order to get it done. That would be the pessimist view. Like, I'm not telling you this team is fixed. And I'm not going to say this team is fully back just yet. I think they're back to being a good baseball team where you can say that's a good team. If they're a good team the rest of the year, they can get to being a host. And getting this sweep put them in a spot where you can be a host. If they get back to being what we've seen at them at their best, though, like they're going to have an opportunity to get another series win or 2 the rest of the way, even with the schedule. And you have 3 top 10 RPI teams. I don't know the official rankings if they're top 10 teams in the poll. I'd imagine they probably are. But between Texas, Auburn, Texas A&M, plus Governor's Cup against Ole Miss. You got some really good opponents left. You're going to have a chance in those games. State at their best can absolutely go and win those series. Are you going to expect State to go take 2 out of 3 in Texas or even Texas A&M right now? Probably not. But I think State can go and hold their own and compete. And, not to undersell Auburn, but it's just that series being at the Dude, which it is weird. The whole the fact that it feels like some of the games at the Dude have been a struggle. But maybe you broke through that this weekend. And seeing the dude effect in action, the clip that's gone viral of the guy filming from the outfield, just working the camera out there, no ESPN audio, and it's just the pure crowd pop. That's like deafening. And it's so, like, obviously you could tell it was an incredible crowd pop from the scenes from ESPN and the fans going crazy. All that, awesome. But the pure, like, unfiltered audio of just the crowd, you don't hear baseball stadiums sound that way, man. That's really freaking cool. And shout out to the State fans for creating a ridiculous atmosphere at the Dude over this weekend. Despite some LSU fans getting into a few places people did not want them to be, and I'm in full agreement on that. Find a way to not let them have spots. I mean, look, I understand we want to be hospitable to visitors, even when it's a rival. I'm not saying shun rivals. I'm not even saying shun Ole Miss fans. Like, be welcoming, but if you're giving up seats behind home plate and you're putting them on a market to where anybody can go buy those, you need to find another way. And if you're just going to let fans have an entire rig to themselves, that's crazy too. And again, I'm speaking as a guy who wasn't there. I'm speaking as someone who's not been in those positions, can't tell somebody what to do with whatever. It's not a good look, in my opinion. But the overall atmosphere was insane. And the way the fan base was able to get behind the team. I mean, you made LSU poop themselves. That's what happened. In the same way that so often Alex Box has done that. And look, I think there has been a talk before that, like, we talk about the Dude effect is a thing. But, like, the one area that Alex Box, despite not being as good of a stadium, and where the LSU fan base has had an edge for a long time over Mississippi State. This is just speaking as objectively. Is Alex Box is one of those stadiums that you'll go into, and we talk about it. I put it out after the Saturday game that, like, State did LSU what LSU pretty much always has done to State, because of the way these series go. And a lot of it is, like, especially when you go to Baton Rouge, which is weird because State has had more success there. But you'll get the games where it's like, if you don't fully put them away early, and it's really tough to put them away early, just in general. But if you don't get them completely out of it, if you open the door at all, the LSU fans and that LSU chant and the Go Tigers chant, it gets after people and it gets people rattled. And Mississippi State has gotten rattled from that. And that's one of those things when you play at Alex Box, you see it time and time again. Whereas, you don't always get that at the Dude, even when it's a great crowd. We've seen it for some big series before, for sure. But it feels like you haven't always had that at Duty Noble Field, which is why there's been some teams that have been able to come in and get it done. Even when there's 15,000 people out there, the intimidation factor hasn't always been there, despite you're fully able to do it. You saw it this weekend, and that's I get you can't ask for that every single week. Like, there's a certain level of juice that comes with that and getting fired up for a series and an opportunity. But that's what the Dude should be. I think we've seen it more in the postseason, for what it's worth, which is if that's the most important time to have it. The Stanford series, the Stanford Super Regional, Notre Dame Super Regional definitely had more of that. It's happened to Ole Miss a few times for sure in the regular season, but it feels like LSU, Arkansas, Georgia was a huge series. Some of those teams have been able to come in and it really hasn't impacted them all that much. You saw it change, and that's a huge positive. This was a big momentum series for State for sure to kind of get back on the right track. Whereas I think the South Carolina series was sort of a sign of life. It's like, yeah, you needed to go get a win. You got a sweep. That's great. That was ultimately you just showing, like, we're not dead. Like, we can play competent baseball. We can win games. But going and sweeping South Carolina does not prove anything about you being that good of a team. It just proved that you weren't going to fall apart the rest of the season. Getting the sweep over LSU, and understanding LSU is not a good team, which is why I'm not going to sit here definitively and tell you they're back to being a contender. This feels like a momentum series, though, of like, okay, we're back to being where we should be able to be the rest of the year. So, yeah, man, great series for State. And it puts you in a position to compete for right back to being in that host conversation. And I'd imagine you're going to see a lot of projections that come out with Mississippi State as a host team as it stands currently. State, as it stands, number 15 in the RPI, 30th in the strength of schedule. But it's a nice move up from where they had been. They'd kind of been outside the top 20 now, or just inside the top 20. Now you're up to number 15. 13-8 in SEC play, 34-10 overall in the season. Still have not taken a single loss to Quad 3 and Quad 4. Only 3 losses against Quad 2. I think that's the Tennessee series, I believe. A 12-10 record against the top 2 quadrants is really good. Right now, the profile is that of a host team, for sure. Now, the conversation is like, what is the path the rest of the way to assure that you're hosting? And I kind of discussed this some. Had some back and forth on Twitter about this after the game. Most everyone has been in agreement, hey, 16 SEC wins, you're going to be a host. And that's understandable just based on anecdotal evidence. When you have an SEC team, so this conference being the best in the country, and it still is, you got an SEC team that's top 20 in the RPI, and they've got a winning conference record. Those teams host with very rare exceptions. When we've seen State not be a host with 16, 17, 18. I don't know if they've not done it as an 18-win team, but I know like 2017, 2014, 2023, I believe. I guess that was 2024. Those teams hosting conversation but not hosting. Why was that? It was because they took bad losses. The 2014 team lost a bunch of midweeks. The 2023 team lost a bunch of ugly games to sub 200 RPI teams early in the season. And, made it up for it in conference play, but they lost a bunch of dumb games early, and it came back to bite them. 2017, I don't remember specifically how that I don't remember if it was midweeks or if it was just they had some SEC losses that were to lesser teams. I don't remember for sure what happened with that team. That was my freshman year at State. I know that's Brent Rooker going crazy. Jake Mangum's still there. I watched that team a ton. I just don't remember for whatever reason. I don't remember a ton of the specifics as to why that team ended up not hosting. But also those are cases of like the strength of schedule not necessarily being where they need to be. And I would imagine you were outside the top 20 in RPI. I think they a couple of years ago I think they were outside the top 20, which was a big part of it. But if you're talking about a team that's inside the top 20, SEC, winning conference record, everything says those teams host. I do wonder, though, if State only won 16 games, would you still get in as a host? And the reason I say that is because you look at the remaining schedule for State. Obviously, 3 big-time series. You go 2 in this off the RPI, number 3 Texas this weekend. Then you get number 6 Auburn at the Dude, and then you're at number 5 Texas A&M. So you have 3 top 6 teams in the RPI that you're going to play series against, plus number 11 RPI Ole Miss on the schedule. You do have Nicholls State mixed in there on the schedule. Just don't lose that game. I'm not going to tell you to do the cancel thing because I know it's frowned upon. Just don't lose that game to Nicholls. I don't think they're going to. I guess knock on wood just to make sure. But, the Ole Miss game is big for sure. But from a series, we're talking about the series the rest of the way. 3 more, you're at 13 SEC wins. So if we're saying for 16, you would need 3 more. They only won 3 more SEC games, though. That would mean a 3-6 finish in conference play the rest of the way. Now, that's understandable given that you're playing some really, really good teams. But, that means you're losing 3 straight series to close the year. Or, let's say you got a series win against Auburn. That means you also got swept somewhere late. And it kind of feels like that might look poor. Now, my guy Colton Watson, who I know does a lot of this stuff for College Baseball Central, he kind of talked about the committee's not supposed to look at it from a series standpoint. They're just supposed to look at the overall results. They do factor in conference standing. If you go and you look up what they say about selection process and considering host, they take conference record, conference standing into account. I think that's how Arizona in 2024 ended up being a host, was because it was like, well, it's the Pac-12 champion. Like, we have to let them host, despite a lot of their metrics not being very good. So they take stuff like that into account for sure. But they're not supposed to necessarily look at it from a series standpoint. That said, if you only won, let's say you took 1 game each the rest of the way, State would have only won 4 SEC series. And again, I know the committee's not supposed to look at that, but then kind of consider the teams that you've done it against. And it's like, if we're talking about this, all right, you took 3 from Ole Miss, and then we're going to say you took 1 apiece from Texas, Texas A&M, and Auburn, so that's 6. You do have the one good win against Southern Miss is number 8 in the RPI, so there's that. But you also have a loss to them. If we're talking about like top 15 RPI, or let's go top 20. I mean, I guess that hurts the argument more for State, but against top 20 RPI teams, you got swept by Georgia. So that would be 3 losses there. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 losses with, I think it was 7 wins that I counted. Potentially 8, depending on what happened in the Governor's Cup. I don't know. I don't know for sure where they would be at and how the committee would factor that in. I forgot about UCLA. That's another loss to a team at the top. So it would be, I guess, 11 losses. The only reason I bring all this up is because I think there's a lot of teams in the hosting conversation right now. And like we're saying right now, State's probably a host right here today. But the rest of the season, if they're not winning and they're just kind of hanging on and sort of treading water, I think you open the door for a team to jump up. I say all this to say, like, I kind of think if you want to feel safe, 17 SEC wins is the way to go, which would mean that you take 1 more series the rest of the way, and then you don't get swept in the other 2. And I'm setting aside the Governor's Cup. I know that factors in. That is a real big part of it. If you had 17 SEC wins plus you win the Governor's Cup, you're 100% hosting. Not a conversation. 17 wins with the Governor's Cup loss, I still think you're probably hosting more than likely. 16 with the Governor's Cup win, I think it's 50-50. 16 with the Governor's Cup loss, it's kind of 50-50 as well. And I know like it feels like a pretty harsh discrepancy between 16 and 17 conference wins. I just think 17 wins, a 4-5 finish in SEC play looks a lot better than going 3-6. Because that suggests like you at least got 1 series in there, plus you didn't get swept. And you were and knowing that you had 2 of those series on the road, that just looks like a stronger close. And this is not factoring in what would happen in the SEC tournament and how much that matters. We'll see. I think if State wants to feel good about hosting, though, they still need to finish strong. They need to continue playing better the rest of the way. You definitely cannot get swept in any of these series, and I think you probably need to pick up 1 more series. So if you're able to win 4 more conference games the rest of the way, I think you're set. At 16, I think you're hanging on by a thread, and it's a conversation of whether or not you're there. All that being said, you've put yourself now in a position to where that's back to being possible. State is right back in line. Like they are on track to be a host team. Whereas you certainly were not this time 2 weeks ago. You had a lot of work to do. Getting back-to-back sweeps has put you back in position to where you are on track to be a host team as long as you continue to play well down the stretch. And that's a good spot to be in. So another good weekend for State baseball. They've fully righted the ship, I would say. Now you go out to Austin and you sort of a conversation of like, all right, just how good are you again? How back to being a contender are you once again? But really good to see State perform well this weekend and get a sweep over LSU for the first time since 1985. That is insane. I think somebody said it's the first time you swept LSU and Ole Miss in the same season ever. I don't know if it's actually ever. I feel like it probably would have had to have happened once before, but that's pretty freaking remarkable. So great job on the Diamond Dogs. Real quick, show you guys the incredible merch we have available on the Voice of College Football shop. All the really cool hats with that VOCFB logo, the T-shirts, polos. Here's that heavyweight tee that's got that maroon color to it. Drinkware. And then we have a lot of teams represented. No Mississippi State, but I know all of you know teams for other programs out there. And if you're trying to find the right gift to get them while repping the Voice of College Football brand, definitely you can find some great gear for them there. So check out the merch we have available for the Voice of College Football. All right. That was a lot of baseball, but baseball earned it. It had a great weekend. Let's talk some NFL draft. A positive NFL draft for Mississippi State football, as two Bulldogs have their names called between Brenen Thompson and Seydou Traore. We'll start with Brenen. He goes in the 4th round, pick number 105 to the Los Angeles Chargers. Our long national nightmare is over. Mississippi State football, for the first time in 30 years, had a wide receiver drafted. It had not been since the first round of the 1996 NFL draft when Eric Moulds was taken by the Bills and went on to have a long, productive career. That is the last time State had a wide receiver taken in the NFL draft. There have been good wide receivers since then. Maybe not a lot of game-changing players, but guys that you could have thought would have had an opportunity. A lot of guys that maybe had they been put in some better situations, possibly could have gotten there. You would also just think, man, as a power conference program, especially in the SEC, you would have just lucked into a draft pick somewhere along the way. But somehow, some way, MSU went 3 decades without having a receiver drafted. And I checked this. And if somebody else has already put this out there and I wasted my time counting this, I feel dumb and I wish I had already looked. This was the longest active streak of not having a wide receiver drafted of any power conference team in college football, both past and present. I looked back to Washington State, Oregon State, teams who are no longer a part of it, teams that are now part of the power conference that maybe weren't previously, even UConn and South Florida, who kind of briefly had fringe power conference status by being a part of the old Big East, had receivers drafted more recently than Mississippi State had. And pretty much everyone had one within like the last decade. It's not even like we're talking about having to go back, or I guess the last 15 years ago. It's not even talking about like having to go back to the early 2000s for all of these teams. Most everybody had somebody taken fairly recently because, like I said, if you're a power conference team, you probably had a receiver come through that was good enough to hear his name called in the NFL draft. And for some reason, Mississippi State hadn't. But that streak is over as Brenen Thompson goes to the Chargers. It's disappointing that he fell to day 3. I think a lot of us thought day 2 we would hear his name called. But as I talked about that last Thursday, I mean, look, because of his size and, the skill set, as some of the questions about his game, there was a possibility he was going to drop. What receivers also just went at a weird time. Chris Bell, a guy who ends up going to Miami, and we'll bring them up here in a minute when we talk about Seydou. That was a guy a lot of people had as one of the first picks of the 2nd round projected, and he doesn't go till like the 4th round, I think. Like late 4th round. I don't remember his exact spot. Elijah Surratt fell quite a bit in the draft, and a lot of people thought he would be a day 2 pick. You had receivers end up at weird places in this draft, and that's one of those deals. It was a very deep receiver class. It was a deep receiver class without a number 1 that was no question about them as an elite prospect. And therefore, that led to a lot of debate over, which flavor of wide receiver is your favorite? And it kind of felt that way all throughout the board. It's like, we can get receivers at various times, which that leads to part of the drop is a lot of teams just felt like we'll go attack other positions here. Like my Saints getting Bryce Lance in the 4th round. I thought he would have been gone a lot sooner than that. So you had receivers that landed at weird times, and Brenen Thompson obviously a part of that, but he goes early. He did not have to wait long on Saturday, again at pick 105, just 5 picks into the Saturday slate. And this is about as good a landing spot as it could have been possible for him. He gets to go to a Chargers team that is regularly in the playoffs, a team that has a possibility to be a contender within the AFC this season, with a head coach in Jim Harbaugh that just wins games, a very good head coach. He has a great quarterback in Justin Herbert. I know Justin Herbert gets clowned on by NFL Twitter as being if man, but Herbert is legitimately a very, very good quarterback. If not, people hate throwing around the elite word because of what about the wins? But just as a player, he's up there as an elite quarterback, and he gets to play for a QB like that. And then the biggest thing is the offensive coordinator he has in Mike McDaniel, who was fired up with the pick. They put out the video like McDaniel basically saying, please get me Brenen Thompson. He was like, I'll take my shirt off if you get me Brenen Thompson. McDaniel loves fast dudes. He wants guys, and he has proven he knows how to use a short, fast wide receiver. He had 2 of them in Miami with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. And those guys put up huge numbers and were very, very productive. McDaniel will know how to make use of him. which gives you a lot of excitement that like he's going to like a really good situation with an OC that knows how to make it work. Like the only thing that I've heard is a concern is, there's still some Chargers fans a little bit iffy about their offensive line, especially on the interior. They did draft, I believe they added a center from Florida. They have some concern, like is Justin Herbert going to have enough time to get the ball downfield to Brenen Thompson, which God, Mississippi State fans know all about that, having watched this past season. But you have to think they'll find ways to get him open downfield, and he's going to be really productive. And he's going to have a role right away. I think he probably steps in as wide receiver number 4. Keenan Allen, who's been the dude for LA for so long, obviously he had a little stint with the Bears. Not expected to be back for the Chargers. It kind of feels like they're moving on from him at this point in his career. And look, they have their 3 clear top guys right now: Ladd McConkey, Quentin Johnston, and then Trey Harris. Look, McConkey is another guy that's a fast player and has a ton of speed, but he's more of a run after catch type. And, they'll throw downfield to him, and they'll throw downfield to him out on the outside, but he does most of his work crossing routes over the middle of the field, which is, not necessarily what you're doing with Thompson, where Thompson's more, the true vertical stuff. Quentin Johnston is their top vertical guy, and it's been a lot better the last couple seasons after a very disappointing rookie year, but he doesn't have the speed that Brenen Thompson does. And you talk about putting Brenen Thompson and Quentin Johnston on the field at the same time, both of them as vertical threats. Like, that's going to be tough for defenses to deal with, for sure. And think about what you have to do as a safety, and then that just opens up all the more space for a guy like Ladd McConkey. Trey Harris, another big body guy out of Ole Miss, we all remember him, but they use him more as a run after catch player and sort of that and short to intermediate target, even as a big body receiver. So Brenen Thompson fills a role for them as that true burner, take the top off the defense. He's going to be able to open up space for the guys underneath. He's going to get shots drawn up for him. I think Brenen Thompson is going to be in for a fun rookie season. I think he will have a big role in this team. And I think it's a great situation. So love it for him. Obviously, Brennan's one of those guys you just get fired up for because, he's a great player, but you can also tell he's a great person with a great family. He was a Mississippi country boy, so if you're a fan, you love that. And for him to step in, be such a big leader, and just embrace Starkville, embrace MSU, and gets to go have the most productive season in school history and then get drafted to a great situation, I think you couldn't ask for anything more. So it's great to see for him. We didn't really talk about anybody else getting picked up when we did the preview for the draft on Thursday night. And that's because, while there was some buzz this guy might go, Brenen was the only one you knew for sure was going to be taken. But Seydou Traore at tight end goes in the 5th round at pick number 180 to the Miami Dolphins. I'll be fair to Seydou. We probably should have talked about it a little bit more because there was some buzz around him in the weeks leading up to the draft that teams were interested with his athleticism. He tested really well at his pro day, and then they also put on an event. He's a part of the International Players Program, being from the UK originally, and they kind of highlight those guys. And teams just sort of saw him as this pass catching weapon, a slightly undersized for a tight end, but even as a flex player, but still a bigger frame than a lot of the guys you're going to have working out of the slot. That these great athletic numbers. He ran in the 4.6s, had a 40-inch vertical, good athletic testing alongside that between some like the 3-cone drill and then the broad jump. And then has shown some really nice flashes as a pure pass catcher. Look, I've always felt he should have been utilized more. I think just using him on those little dump offs wasn't enough. I felt like that was a guy I would have loved to have seen State take more shots to down the field, or Jeff Lebby open up some crossing patterns to get him involved with and get the ball in his hands. So teams were interested for sure. And also kind of you add in that there's because he's part of that International Players Program, if you have one of those guys on your roster, does not count against the roster limit. So you can have, it's like the 53-man roster, but if you have one of those guys, that's number 54. So that's a reason for teams to be interested. There's also just a tight end craze in the NFL right now. There was a run on tight ends because everybody has seen the success that the teams that utilize a lot of 12 and 13 personnel have been able to have. it's a copycat league, and everybody's like, well, we got to get as many players like that on the roster. And for a Dolphins team that's rebuilding, they kind of took a similar approach here. And you're talking about going to a team in Miami that both needed tight ends but needed pass catchers. Jalen Waddle's gone now. Obviously, Tyreek Hill, done. That receiving room is garbage, both between the receivers and the tight ends. And because of that, anybody who could step in and prove themselves as a big-time pass catcher is going to have an opportunity. And, they took some questionable picks in the draft, but they got guys I like. I mentioned Chris Bell earlier. He falls to them. I think he's a really good player. Shout out to our guy, our former guy, Kevin Coleman. He got him in the 5th round, I think, like right before Seydou. I think that's a massive steal. I think Kevin Coleman's going to be a player. So they've added a couple pieces who are interesting, but there's going to be an opportunity for Seydou. And like he'll have a role early, I think, because they have Greg Dulcich at tight end as their starter. He's just kind of an average guy, not really an impact player. In the 3rd round, they took Will Kachmarek from Ohio State. He's kind of that true inline wide tight end, really good blocker, can do some stuff as a receiver, but he's mostly in there because of the presence he's going to give you and blocking up front. That opens a door for Seydou as that F tight end, that flex player who you can put in the slot. And look, for him to get a more consistent role, gonna have to develop as a blocker. And the role he has, it's not about going and blocking defensive ends. It's about, can you grow to where against linebackers and safeties, blocking in space, or even in the run game, can you get to where you're doing that at a really high level? And look, he's got room to grow. I didn't realize he'd only been playing 11-man football since 2020. So still very young in football years from a developmental standpoint. He can grow in that. And if he can really fine-tune the receiving threat that he can be as well and take some of those flashes he showed us and turn it into like, oh, this guy's a real weapon, like he could be a player and have a role in the NFL for several years. And this is a big opportunity for him. So, not the best landing spot in terms of just an organization and where they're at, but in terms of an organization where he's going to have an opportunity early and not just come in as like, all right, we took him as a late round pick, as a project player, to where maybe if he shows off in camp or shows off as part of the practice squad for a couple of years, he'll have an opportunity. I think he goes to Miami and it's like he's going to have a chance to play right away and be a rostered tight end in year 1. So love that for him. State had a few guys get picked up as undrafted free agents. Albert Reese, an offensive tackle, going to the Panthers. Devon Booth with the Browns. Jerron Manning with the Falcons. Makes a ton of sense. All 3 talented players who are going to get their opportunity as undrafted free agents. And you had a couple guys get a chance with a rookie minicamp. Nick Mitchell to the Titans, and then Diego Brumfield to the Seattle Seahawks. Hoping to give the opportunity to get signed. So shout out to those guys for getting those opportunities, and you certainly wish them all the best. But yeah, good draft for State. Good to see those guys get the opportunity to go when they did. Mississippi State football is not done adding talent to its roster. Even here, now that we're at the end of spring and we're coming up on the summer months, they are still looking to add depth, and they did that over the weekend. Most notably picking up transfer offensive lineman Jamari Freeman out of Mercer, 6'4", 300 pounds, interior offensive line prospect. Began his career at Tennessee Tech and then spent last season at Mercer, where he was an all-conference player. And State had to beat out Arkansas and Auburn for him. You had SEC programs very interested. And this is an important get for State here late in the cycle. We've talked a lot about the offensive line and just all the concern there, some of the optimism there coming out of spring. You feel better about the group, but definitely a position where you felt like State needed to add as many bodies as possible, guys who had done the job before and had been able to play well before. And at this point in the cycle, we were saying this after missing out on Jordan Seaton, and then obviously you then come to find out even more so after finding out that Brandon Snee was not going to be eligible. It's kind of a question of like, well, crap, like, who are they going to be able to get that can step in at this point? Like, you're not adding a starter at this point, and you're probably still not adding a starter here with Freeman. This is mostly a depth addition. But to get a guy that has played a lot of football, get a guy who was an all-conference player at a lower level that other SEC programs were interested in at this point is as good as you could have asked for. And it's a pickup that I think you needed. Jeff Lebby has kind of talked quite a bit about that he feels good about his top, 6 or 7 players on the offensive line. Specifically feels good about the starting unit. He thinks they're going to be able to field a top 5 that is good. But you got to be able to rotate bodies in the offensive line, man. You can't have 5 players that you can roll with and that be it. You've got to have more than that. We saw it last season. You got to be able to add bodies to the room that you trust can play. And like we mentioned, when you lost Brandon Snee, that alone, you were down a guy. And keep in mind, they lost Brandon Snee, and then they had still, even once they had Brandon Snee committed, still wanted Jordan Seydou. So kind of wanted multiple more guys in the room. At this point, you're probably not getting another one of that, but you're at least replacing what you lost with Snee. Not from a position standpoint, but from a guy that has been a good player at a lower level, maybe not ideal SEC size, but can step in and ideally be a competent player for you. And I also think you're getting a guy who gives you depth at a spot where you need it a little bit more, because the interior offensive line, especially at the guard spots, you don't have a ton of options for where you're going to turn. Because you have DJ Chester as a guy that's played a lot there and is going to be one of your starting guards with Cannon Boone starting at center. LJ Prudhomme, people are really, really high on, was a starter in the spring, and we've talked a lot about that. That's a positive sign, frankly, that they're confident having him as a starter at this point. But it's a redshirt freshman, guy who hasn't done it before. After that, I think part of the reason we were talking about Blake Steen a lot as a guard is because you needed a little bit more depth there, and he's a guy who can do it. And I think that's still a possibility for him, where if you needed to plug him in at a guard spot, you could possibly do that. But after that, you really don't have a whole lot of options. TJ Lockhart, kind of. That's sort of it, right? Bringing in Freeman gives you another option at guard and a guy who can step in and play that role, and you would expect can at least be a competent player for you up front. That's what you're getting by bringing in Jamari Freeman at that position. So this is a really good addition. And that helps you out from a tackle standpoint as well, because now Steen can probably focus a little bit more on tackle as depth there. But I still think Blake Steen, I would expect, even after adding Freeman, wherever Mississippi State has an opening, Blake Steen is going to fill one of those holes and is going to step in. But now, between Miles McVay, Jakeem Shumpert-Perkins, Blake Steen, you have 3 guys at tackle you feel good about, plus Saquon Miles, Isaiah Dent are also options as well, where there's some high talent upsides. They have the frame for it. If you had to put them in the game, you potentially could do that as well. So this is a really nice pickup. You love it for Mississippi State. It helps them out quite a bit. Just getting more depth in the room. This is as good as you could have asked for in the offensive line at this point. A couple other additions from Colorado, safety Terrence Love, 6'2", 210 player. This is a guy who was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school, had all the offers. Signed with the Auburn Tigers, spent 2 seasons there, primarily played special teams. Took some snaps on defense, but this was primarily a guy who was out there as a special teams player. Transferred to Colorado last year. I think looking to be more of an impact on defense. Played in the season opener, and I think it was 8 snaps on defense in that game, 1 snap on special teams. Goes out of the game, though, with injury, or at least was injured coming out of that game. Missed the rest of the year with a shoulder injury done for the year. Left the team in October with no given reason, so he hasn't been with the team in several months now. But now transferred to Mississippi State. It's a special teams addition, right? This is not a guy that you're expecting to come in and compete for a starting job or even a rotational role within that safety room. I think the guy State has at safety, you don't need another guy in there to really contribute, but you probably do want more guys who can help with special teams. This is a guy that has done a lot of that throughout his career, and still has talent upside based on what he was at high school. State special teams were a struggle last year, right? So adding a guy who's got a lot of experience there can be a benefit as well. But look, you're at there also at this point, you're just trying to round out your roster with guys that ideally have some talent to them. Last addition we'll talk about, JUCO defensive lineman Lorenz Cannon out of a California JUCO, 6'4", 260, so you kind of expect him to be at an edge. He's going to enroll in the summer. I'm not expecting much there. You look at the offer sheet, Mississippi State far and away the top offer there. I would imagine probably a redshirt candidate more than anything else. But 105 roster spots to fill. State had some spots to work with, and you're getting a guy. I think you're hoping for some upside, hoping to develop. They still would like to get another edge rusher. There's some guys out there they've been in talk with. There's one kid I think they really would like to get who was productive at a lower level, but it's just a matter not of whether you can make it happen. So we'll see what happens there if they're able to add another body. Again, I don't think you're realistically bringing a guy in who's going to compete for a starting job, but if you could get someone who's some depth, who has played a little bit, that would be a benefit at that edge position as well. But look, the pickup of Jamari Freeman's a big one. That's a nice addition for this team. So a good spot to be in here late, adding some more depth at offensive line. Last thing, and then we'll get out of here. Got another portal pickup for Mississippi State basketball in Thomas Bassong out of Paris, France, a forward for Florida State transfer who was coming off his freshman season. 6'8", 203, made 17 starts for the Seminoles this season as a wing. Averaged 5.9 points, 3.5 boards while shooting about 48.6% from the floor. Not a very good three-point shooter, not a very good free throw shooter. But this is a guy there, everything you look at, the talk is defense. He has a 7'2" wingspan, so that rangy defender on that wing spot. And since his time as a recruit coming out of the international ranks to what he did as a freshman at Florida State, it's defense, and a guy that can give you that. And I kind of talked about wanting a 3-and-D wing. Doesn't sound like he's going to give you the 3, but if you get the defense, that's a big benefit as well. And it's because of that, it's another positive pickup. You've now added 2 players, both between your backcourt and then at the wing, that you would say are plus defenders. Simpkins at guard is being that guy that can really give you a defensive presence in the front court with all the scoring you have around him. And then now Bassong is a guy who can factor into that as well at the wing. I don't know that you would put him at the 4, but a guy that gives you that type of a presence, that's big because State needs that defensive help. And you could probably throw Kendall Sanders as the other forward coming in from Utah. That's another guy that's got some good length to him, good size. He's a little bit more of a scoring threat, but someone that has some chops potentially as a defender as well. Very clearly trying to get better defensively. And when you look at what you've done overall in the portal and just where you're at roster-wise, I'm not going to factor in the freshmen. I understand you have a couple guys who redshirted last year that are going to have a chance to contribute. You have a true freshman class coming in with guys who have a chance to contribute, a lot of upside. I'm sure you're going to see a couple freshmen play again for Mississippi State this year. I think probably going to have to, because I don't think you're going to bring in so many transfers that you don't see any of those freshmen play. But I think you're set in the backcourt now with a superstar in Josh Hubbard, King Grace in the flashes he showed you. R.J. Johnson was a good pickup out of Kennesaw. And then what I talked about with Simpkins can give you as a defender, also occasionally as a shooter as well. That's a good group there. If those are your top 4 guards, and then you add in some of the other pieces that are going to step in this season as a freshman, Willie Burnett, for example, like that's, you got a good group there. At the 3 and the 4, I think you've got some upside with Bassong at the 3, Sanders playing the 4. Again, athletic players, big frame, can help you some with some defense. Obviously, Sanders giving you that offensive threat as a guy who maybe could play the wing, but could also be a bit of a stretch 4 for you as well, as a good shooter from that spot, and a good rebounder. There's good potential there. You got to get the front court fully figured out. And the one thing for me is more than anything, if they could get a proven big, which is tough. I may have talked about this already, but when you talk about the centers that are available in the portal right now, one, it feels like everybody's looking for that. Everybody wants a center who has got the proven high-level production. There's a couple 4-star guys out there that, at least on the last check, were still uncommitted, but I don't know whether or not State's in a factor for those players or not. I don't know about guys from other smaller school ranks. I think they need somebody, though, who has been productive and had done it before. Even if you're not talking about bringing in a 4-star transfer, if you can find that as somebody who's been a good defender and a legitimate scoring threat at the 5, I think you need it on this team badly. One, I feel like State, you kind of just need that. Like, I think Chris Jans, we've seen it. His offenses have been most productive when they have a 5 that can score. And that goes back to 2 years ago when they tried to revolutionize. They tried to play more 4 out and try to spread the floor, try to push tempo. When were those teams the best on offense? It was when Keyshawn Murphy and Michael Nwoko, for that matter, you were feeding the ball down low to them and letting them go to work. That's when those offenses were best, when they were able to have that presence in the front court. And obviously, a couple back previously with Tolu Smith, where he was the focal point of the offense. You were more probably a little bit better off then. You thought you were going to get some of that with Quincy Ballard and didn't work out. Now, I don't know that Quincy Ballard was ever going to consistently come in and be a 10-plus point a game scorer, but I think you were expecting a better version of Abdul Adu, I would say, was what you were hoping for there. Because Adu, by the end of his career, was a guy that was going to get you, 7, 8, 9 points a game with the occasional double-double mixed in. But he was going to play great defense, be that rim protector, going to rebound well in the middle, to where he was a fine starting center. When with what you had around him from a scoring standpoint on those Howland teams, that should have been enough to win a lot more than they did. I think you were kind of hoping to get that with Ballard, where he's going to be an elite rim protector who then can also go out and, he's not going to take a ton of shots, not going to get a ton of buckets. But when he does go up, he's going to score. He was like a 75% shooter coming in. You got neither, right? It just didn't happen for him. So can you get someone like that who can actually play the role you were expecting? That's what, to me, you're kind of looking for at this point. And then you need somebody else in the front court also, just to add more depth there. Another guy at the 4, I would say. Look, or if you take 2 guys where both of them can kind of play a 4 or 5 and you sort of split between it, I guess that's a possibility as well. Maybe that might be the route you have to take. But look, I was talking about wanting State to take another center. Even if you thought Jamar was back, I felt they needed to get somebody there, a veteran player there. With him gone, and you still haven't addressed that, then Guy Chol leaves as well. I know there's T. Bartlett has some excitement around him. You got another freshman coming in, but they really need somebody, in my opinion, who can step in and play in that role, and really need a couple more bodies in the front court. I think if you get 2 more transfers in the front court and they're quality pieces, you've probably put together a solid enough transfer class to field a competitive team next year. Obviously, I talked a lot about I would love to see a superstar. And I'd love to see that all-in type of approach. If you can still go out and get somebody, that'd be huge. But we'll see whether or not State's able to make that happen. That'll do it. A lot of fun stuff to get into. Love being able to recap a fun series for baseball, the NFL draft, and I think those guys, shout out again, congrats to Brenen and to Seydou and then all the guys with UDFA signings. But I think those draft picks especially got some landing spots. They're going to be ideal for them in terms of the opportunities coming. Obviously, big one coming up for Bulldog baseball in the Governor's Cup this week. A win that would definitely go a long way towards the hosting conversation. And then out to Austin as really a prove-it series. Are you back to being a legitimate contender in college baseball? Got a chance to prove it there. So a lot of fun stuff coming up to talk about in these coming weeks. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. If you haven't already, please leave us a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and have those notifications turned on so you do know when we do go live. And as always, swing your sword and hail State.
Hey, y'all. This is Grant Sashray of LSU at the Voice of College Football Network. I'm here today to announce that the Voice of College Football Network now has its official website. It's been uploaded so you can look at all the latest news and content from the Voice of College Football Network. You can also look at different forums, channels, shows, and it has to show all the show schedules right here and the host. Make sure to check out the Voice of College Football's new website at vocfb.com. Once again, vocfb.com.